So, good day, good afternoon, or good evening, whatever time you watch this video. So, our next topic is of tests and testing. So, as a overview, this chapter explains what are the characteristics of good tests. It should be noted that for a test to be considered a good test, there should be a process and rules to be followed. But first, we will discuss some of the assumptions about psychological tests and assessment. So here is the topic outline. So we will discuss some assumptions about psychological testing and assessment. The first assumption, which is the psychological traits and state exist. Next is assumption number 2, which state that psychological traits and states can be quantified and measured. For intended learning outcomes, so at the end of discussion, students will be able to first define psychological traits and states, distinguish psychological trait and states, and lastly, explain how trait and states can be measured and quantified. So, assumptions about psychological traits refers to the things we expected from doing it. These are the things we believe that and exist and will come out after conducting a test. So the first assumption is psychological traits and states exist. So in conducting a psychological test, our variables are the traits. So when we say traits, it refers to any distinguishable, relatively enduring way in which one individual varies from another. So it is our characteristics that make us unique or different from the others. It is semi-permanent, means it was there since we are a child, but its degree and strength and manifestation change. So let's say for instance, being a noisy or jolly, we have that trait since we were kids, but as we reach adulthood, we have to minimize it, for we have to act professional and mature. They the person cannot control traits and they will come out naturally. So, according to Alport, there are 4,504 words in the English language that describe traits. So, one of those traits are psychological traits related to intelligence, specific intellectual abilities, cognitive style, adjustment, interest, attitude, and sexual preferences and orientations. State, on the other hand, distinguish one person from another but are relatively less enduring. It means it is not long term, it lasts for a short time. So, example of states are our feelings and moods. So, we can be happy and stressed right now, but the next day we are happy and overwhelmed. We can be in love also today, but a year after we fell out of love. So, psychological traits and states don't exist physically. It doesn't have a circuit in our brain. We cannot see, touch, or hear them. So, they exist only as construct. So, when we say construct, it is an informed scientific concept developed or constructed to describe or explain behavior. So, they were abstract, but the concept was there in our mind, so they're scientifically developed in our mind. So we can infer their existence through overt behavior or observable action, or the product of an observable action. So it is the behavior that could indicate or points out the existence of trait and states. So, for instance, smiling points out that we are happy. Another example would be the trait introvert. We could notice its existence through observable behavior like being silent or not talkative, being prefer being alone or hate crowded places. So next assumption is psychological traits and states can be quantified and measured. So for a psychological traits and state to be measured and quantified, they should be carefully and rigorously defined. So that's the first step for us to measure and quantify a traits. We have to define it carefully. So the whole concept or anything related to that construct should identify in that way. It would be easy for a test developer to make an item content that would provide insight into it. So let's say for instance the trait shyness. So one of the manifestation of shyness is being anxious or tense. So after making an item related to that trait, the next step will be the scoring on how we compute the score. So there are several ways on how to score a test, but the most widely used method or the common one is the cumulative scoring. So cumulative um, this cumulative scoring assumes that the more the test taker responds in a particular fashion, the more the test taker exhibit the attributes being measured. So that's all for today. So Mr. Lanzi Farrell will discuss the remaining 5 assumptions about psychological tests and assessment. So thank you.